Thank you everyone for coming tonight. What a beautiful stretch of weather we're enjoying here in Happy Valley. Call to order the May 17th, 2021 meeting of the Harris Township Planning Commission. Thank you all for being here. Before we get into the meeting, I thought it would be appropriate for Township Manager Amy Farkas how questions and comments are going to be handled during the meeting tonight, and then we'll go into the approval of minutes, public comment, and agenda as indicated. Amy?
Thanks, Chris. So the way we're going to do this tonight is very similar to the way we've done things in the past. If you are not speaking, please put yourself on mute. If you're a member of the public, we just ask that you either physically raise your hand, and I'll be on the lookout, or you use the raise your hand feature when you want to speak, and then we'll recognize you and let the Planning Commission take their time with the discussion tonight as well. So with that, I think we're good to go.
Okay, great. So minutes from the April meeting, we had the Planning Commission members and staff were copied on a couple of modest edits that a couple of Planning Commission members had to 3 items in particular. I don't know that we need to identify those explicitly here tonight. They had to do with item 5A, 5C, and item 6 from last month. With that said, with some modifications to the minutes that came out, anyone have other comments before we hear a motion to consider approving the minutes as amended? Someone want to move that?
I would move that we approve the minutes as amended.
Thanks. Bill, was that a second from you?
Yes, it was.
Great. All those in favor of approving the April minutes of the Planning Commission, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes approved. Public comment, things that are not on the agenda for tonight. Anyone in the audience have some things to offer or suggest or comment on? Hearing none, seeing no hands. Let's move on then to tonight's agenda and approving of that. We have 2 things: rural rezoning map review and the zoning designation for the IMO properties, and then some reports.
Bob's making a motion.
Bob?
Yep.
Okay, move to approve the agenda. Any second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Kent. Those in favor of approving the agenda, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So we're on to Planning Commission business. Point A, rural rezoning map review. Mark or Amy, who wants to kick this off?
We'll go with Mark.
All right, so I am going to be pulling up a PowerPoint presentation here in just a second to go through this item. But before I do, I just wanted to give a bit of background for everyone who's here on the meeting tonight. So back at the April 12th meeting, the Board of Supervisors had forwarded the proposed rural zoning map back to the Planning Commission for further review and discussion. And they specifically asked that the Planning Commission look at the proposed zoning map, the methodology that was used in all the planning that was done back in 2014 and 2015, and to determine if any changes are needed to any of the boundaries that were proposed. They also asked that you look at the former Yoakum properties that are now owned by the Immels to see if those could be included with the proposed agricultural district. So this very first item is just focusing on kind of a large big picture look at all of the rural areas and not at the Immel properties. That's going to be the next agenda item. What I can say is that we really focused on the locations of the existing or the proposed ag and rural residential districts. It seemed from the discussion last month that the commission was fairly satisfied with the natural areas districts, but certainly if there's any changes that the commission would like to suggest to those, we can hear those later. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen real quick here
Yeah, you should be able to
and
share.
share this presentation. And then we'll run through it here real quick. Okay. So the first thing I want to pull up, and these maps were included with your agenda for tonight. And this map is a recreation of one that was used back in 2014 and 2015 for the Designated Rural Areas Project. And at that time, the commission had asked staff to prepare a map that showed the location of where residential lots exist in the township's rural areas. And back then we had done it where I think it was just every property that was under 10 acres in size was highlighted in yellow. On this map, we went with kind of dark outlines around the parcels. And then the red hatched properties are those that are located in an open space rural clustering development. And then the yellow parcels are those that were established as exempt lots through our open space rural clustering regulations. So as staff, we took a look at this first, try to take a first stab at identifying some areas where we think changes may have occurred since the planning was done back in 2014 and 2015. Since the Planning Commission last month said you felt that the methodology that was used to define these boundaries was valid, we didn't see a reason to kind of go off and do anything different other than to kind of look at this and see what has changed since the planning was done, you know, about 5 to 6 years ago. And really these two areas kind of here on the west side of the township out near Shingletown were two areas that definitely jumped out at us, that there's been some development that took place over the last couple of years that was not captured in that original planning effort in 2014 and 2015. So what we did is we also put together a couple of areas that we think the commission should probably look at and discuss and determine whether or not zoning changes are needed. The other thing that I'd like to point out too is, and hopefully you can all see this pointer feature here, but these hooks that we put in two locations on this map indicate properties that are probably they're bisected by a road. So this little triangular shaped piece that's in the growth boundary that is proposed in the ag district is actually part of a 270 acre farm that is mostly outside of the growth boundary. Same with this little piece of property here. It's part of a much bigger parcel on the other side of the road. And so I just wanted to point out that's why some of those parcels were included with the primary zoning of the remainder of the parent tract. So as I said, you know, we have these numbered areas that we think the Planning Commission should look at. So I think from staff's perspective, it'd probably be helpful if we worked through each one of those areas one at a time and have the Planning Commission provide your feedback. And then when we're done going through that, the Planning Commission could indicate if there's any other areas where you feel that there should be changes considered. And if so, you can provide your findings as to why they should be changed. So unless anybody from the Planning Commission has any concerns with that approach, I'll go ahead and start working through these 5 areas real quick. Okay, well, I didn't hear anybody have any concerns, so I'll just go ahead and jump in on area number 1. So this location, this is out near, it's off of Shingletown Road near the Hess softball fields. What we have here is this is all in the proposed agricultural area, agricultural district. So the new agricultural regulations would apply to this area. This property here developed probably here in the last 3 or 4 years as Mountain View Acres. It's a open space rural clustering subdivision. And so you have an open space lot down here, and then these are the residential parcels over here. And in addition, we also have the Hess softball field complex that was part of an open space rural clustering development. And actually, it's one I think that during this process, we missed capturing this one. It doesn't quite jump out at you as a true residential development because you have this over 10 acre parcel here that could be farmed. And these are the 2 residential lots. But the Hess softball field property is the open space parcel for this development. So it didn't really, it was one of those that I think just from, you know, kind of institutional knowledge was forgotten when we went through this process. And either way, we feel from a staff's perspective, it would probably be worth considering this area being included in the rural residential district. It would tie together the rural residential area over here along Woodside Drive, as well as this rural residential area here just to the east of Windmill Road. So with that, I guess, I'll turn it back over to you, Chris, to see if the Planning Commission wants to discuss these one at a time and decide whether or not you want changes made or not, or if you want me to go through all 5 of them.
Mark, why don't you go through all 5 of them and then we
can-
can go back at the end?
Sure thing.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I was going to say. Let them have some specific comments or questions right now on this particular set of properties. Let's not pause. If there's a reason to pause, though, that's fine. It's a good opportunity to do that.
Okay. Well, the next one here is area number 2, and this is located off of Misty Hill Drive and near Mountain Road. What we have here is these 3 parcels were recently part of several subdivisions that took place. This is an exempt lot from an open space rural clustering development. And then back here, this lot was split into 2. So we have 3 properties in total in this area here. All 3 are too small to be used for agricultural purposes. So we felt since they're 3 residential lots, they're located adjacent to this residential area over here, it would make sense to extend the rural residential district to include those 3 properties. And area number 3, which is right next door here, this includes 3 parcels as well. These properties are, again, all under 10 acres in size and have been developed for residential uses. So it's another area we felt we could extend this rural residential district over here. And this little piece here actually is part of this lot across Misty Hill, but it's all one property, that little square. So does anyone have any questions on area number 2 or number 3?
Chris has a question.
Mark, what's the property just to the west of that little blip up to the north of Misty Hill Drive, just to the west of it, that large field there, number 1, and number 2, what's to the west of the westernmost blue property, that big patch of woods there? What are those 2 areas right now? What would they be?
This area is in the natural areas district. This is owned, I believe, by the Water Authority. So this is part of a large piece of land owned by the State College Borough Water Authority. This piece here is just a 10+ acre lot that was created as part of the Rittenhouse subdivision several years ago.
So it's zoned ag?
Yes, it's proposed for inclusion in the updated agricultural district, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So area number 4 is located at the very end of Bailey Lane. And, looking at this, it's a 32-acre parcel with a smaller 2-acre parcel as part of it. But this 32-acre parcel is being farmed. I believe it's owned by the owner of this farm down here. So this is an area that, after looking at it again, it probably makes a lot of sense to include this within the proposed agricultural district rather than the rural residential district, just due to its size, the fact it's not part of any type of an open space rural clustering development or has any residential development on it other than this one small 2-acre lot over here. Does anybody have any questions about number 4? Not hearing any, then the last area is area number 5, and this is the property that is located here, actually right below the Immel properties, which are up here to the north of 322. This property, I think, was discussed a little bit at last month's meeting. It accesses this private drive that comes down here. These properties here are all located in the regional growth boundary. This one is not, but it is over 10 acres in size. However, being that it accesses a private street and it has been developed more or less just for residential uses, it could be included in the rural residential district if the Planning Commission wanted to. And I think that is the end of my presentation. That covers all 5 of the properties. So what we're looking for from the Planning Commission this evening is direction on each of these areas that we called out. And then if there's additional areas that the commission feels needs to be looked at, or you feel changes are needed, I can pull back up the overall zoning map again and we can look at it that way. I'll go ahead and just stop sharing for now to allow for discussion. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have, on the planning commission, have some comments or questions on this? Things to offer?
Kent has his hand up.
Kent?
Kent, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I have an opinion on each of these 5 areas that Mark just presented. Area number 4, I do think that makes sense to include that in the ag district because of the size of it. And I assume it would also include that small residential lot there at the top of Bailey Lane as well.
Yes.
And I think that all makes sense. So that I do think that areas 1, 2, and 3, in my mind, I think they're okay. Just staying as ag, with the winery there and, and the whole surrounding area of that being ag, I don't have an issue with those being in the ag district with the new zoning as well. I don't feel that strongly about it. That's just my personal opinion on that. And area number 5, I think I do see that the logic of putting that in RR, but I would just defer until we get into the next agenda item before we get on that. And that's all I had to say.
Other commission members, comments on these maps, areas 1 through 5? 1 through 4, actually.
Bob has his hand up.
To Kent's good point.
No, same observations. I just want to reinforce them.
Just that. Thanks, Bob.
Pardon me?
Okay.
I know. I'm just saying. I'm just supporting what Kent was saying. That I agree with him that on those changes that were recommended.
George has his hand up, Chris.
George, please.
Yes, I'm in general agreement with Kent, except on area 1, especially with it being organized as it is under the open space clustering. And it just seems to me that as opposed to 2 and 3, 4 should I agree completely should be ag. 5, I agree, let's hold on that for the moment. And 2 and 3 being ag is, I think, logical. However, with space 1 or area 1, I see a strong argument for that falling into the rural residential category.
So I'll just follow up on that then. The lot right next to the winery, the existing winery, along that runs the frontage of Shingletown Road. Is there any potential for the winery expanding into that lot?
No, if you're talking about the open space lot that's located in area number 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the open space rural clustering regulations, they specify what uses are allowed on open space lots, and a farm winery is not listed as a permitted use on an open space lot. So there'd be no way for that winery to expand out there.
Okay, well, I'm fine with what George said then.
Any other planning commission members on this? Amy, are you looking for a motion to approve these or deny these recommended changes? Do you want to do them individually or as a sort of a nuanced package?
I think you should do them individually.
I have a question
Bob?
I have a question for George. So George, in lot number 1, if I'm understanding, just so I have my picture clear here, you're suggesting that that lot between Hessfield and the farm lane become rural residential, basically?
Suggesting that whole bolded area with the one smack in the middle of it be changed from agricultural to rural residential, yes.
But what do we have surrounding that?
We have RR on
RR.
one side of it, RR, an isolated RR on the other side of it, and we have ag on the north and south of it.
And then the corner is rural rural districts.
The question is, it seems to me, might be, what about the space in the middle containing 2 and 3? That
Right.
will remain ag despite being then surrounded by RR.
Well, that was my point. If I agree with ag in those two positions, I think one has to stay in is ag.
So, to me, the open space clustering trumps it, but whatever. I'm not strongly swayed in one way or another. But to me, the open space designation is much more likely that it carries a rural residential set of characteristics.
And you're okay with putting rural residential next to the ball field?
The ball field would be in rural residential with number
Well,
one.
okay, yeah, but essentially you're going to put houses up. I mean, you've got four or five houses there now on Woodside, and if you start putting more houses in there, it just,
Not with it being an open space for
Yeah.
that development.
The softball field is the open space lot for that development.
right, but you could essentially put development in there, right, in section 1. No, we're not going to put that in there. They
The
can't.
only thing that could potentially develop would be where the number 1 is on your map, that 10-acre parcel that's there between Hess softball field and the 2 residential lots along Farm Lane could be further developed
Right.
residentially, but that can happen now regardless of what zoning is in place
Right.
because it's in an open space development.
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. In that chunk there's the ball field and the lot that Kent was referring to. Those are the 2 open space lots that need to remain open space.
Correct.
Okay, that was my understanding.
I'll ask, Mark, are you able to just share that
Yeah.
map area 1?
You bet. Let me just pull that back up here. Let me, it's taking its time. There we go.
Yeah, so what you're saying is everything that's within that blue border would switch from ag to RR. So you would have ag to the north and south still, but the on the east and west sides, it'd be connected to RR.
Right.
So
And if I can ask Bob, you're questioning why you would have moved things from RR there, and then just a few plots away, you have this area up by Misty Hill that that would be separated by ag, but then would be RR as well. Is that still a concern for you?
No, it's not a lot of heartburn for me.
Okay.
I'm okay. Just, I'm trying to get clarity on the. just
Yeah,
putting the-
yeah.
I thought
Okay,
it-
any other comments on these 1 through 4 areas before we vote on this and move on? Okay, let's do this one at a time then. So map area 1, the idea to move this to rural residential. Here, you want to do an individual motion or just take these discussion and then as a block, Amy?
I would do an individual motion for each one.
Okay, let's do map area 1. Hear a motion on moving these from ag to RR, please.
I would like to make the motion that we move lot 1 to consider it as an RR zoning.
Okay,
I'll
A
second that.
okay. Any other discussion? Those in favor of that change, please signify by voting aye.
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 Opposed? Great, let's move on then, please, to map area 2 and 3. And the idea to, there's the contiguousness of moving those to RR, but there's also been conversation about leaving them as ag. So who wants to move us off of this pedestal to one direction or the other?
I'll make a motion just for discussion purposes, that we just keep those as proposed now as ag.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay. Discussion on this? Okay, those in favor of keeping it in ag as was original, vote aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
And that was for number 2 and number 3, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, yes.
And now number 4, this large parcel up, I don't know, are the Rudys still living there? Byron Rudy was one of my bosses at the Penn State Dairy back in the day. And they had a good scene there, for sure. Does anybody know if the Rudys are still in that house? Sorry, just a little sidebar. Okay, keeping, excuse me, consider moving that or keeping that in the ag district versus changing that over to RR.
So yeah, right now it's proposed for RR, and I'll move that area 4, including that residential lot at the top of Bailey Lane, be zoned ag.
And I'll second that.
Okay, discussion. Those in favor of the motion as made? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna wait on 5. I think there's some logic there, if that's okay with staff, and we move on to the B part of our agenda for this evening.
Okay, so this next item is specifically related to the request that the proposed zoning designation for the IMO properties that were formerly owned by Mr. Yoakum be changed from rural residential to agricultural. And I included some information in your packet this evening on these properties, and I am going to again share a brief presentation with everyone just to give everybody that's in attendance tonight an overview of what has been requested and what staff's analysis is on the 2 requests that were made. So to start things off, the former property owners, the Yoakums, had requested that the property be included in the updated agricultural district rather than the proposed rural residential district. So just as a reminder to everyone, what the Planning Commission has worked on the past, 5 to 8 years of planning and putting together new zoning regulations is the Planning Commission came up with 4 new zoning districts. And one of those has the same title as a current district, which is agricultural. And then there's a couple new districts that are completely different, have different names to them. And the Yoakums had asked that their property not be included in rural residential as was proposed and rather be moved to agricultural. There was also an alternative request that was made by the Yoakum's solicitor, Mr. Glantz, and that alternative was to change the zoning designation, or not change the zoning designation, I'm sorry, but if the zoning designation was not changed, that the township, they found it would be acceptable if the township were to permit current agricultural uses in the rural residential district on properties of 10 acres or more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some information on both of these requests and provide, again, the Planning Commission and everybody in attendance with a little bit of background on what's being asked for and perhaps why. So the first thing I think we'd like to, kind of understand is the purpose of this request. Agriculture is a permitted use in the proposed RR district. And I know we've talked about that at length with both the board and the Planning Commission. So this proposed district will still allow agricultural uses just as they're allowed today. It is true that not all of the uses that are permitted in the current or proposed ag district are listed in the proposed RR district. So there are differences in what uses can be done in the new proposed rural residential district, as well as the proposed updates to the agricultural district. It is staff's understanding, based on comments that have been made through written communication as well as during meetings, that the purpose of this request is primarily to permit the following uses on the Immel properties: farm wineries, landscape contractor businesses, and agri-tainment enterprises, because those are three uses that would not be allowed in the proposed RR district. As I mentioned, all other current agriculture or agriculture related uses are allowed. So we believe this was the intent of the request. A little bit of background here, and I apologize. I know you've probably seen this slide at least once, but just some background on the Immel properties. These properties were subdivided from one parcel. These three lots were created by the Kissels in 2001, who owned it at that time. And to come up with this lot layout, they utilized the township's open space rural clustering regulations. The properties consist of a 17.4 acre open space lot that includes 3 dwelling units as well as farm uses, a 5.3 acre residential lot, and a 3.4 acre residential lot, both of which are officially vacant. Although I do understand they may use the 5.3 acre lot for some type of agricultural uses. The plan notes on this plan state that the lots may not be further subdivided. It also states that the use of the open space lot must comply with the township's open space regulations, and that access to these lots are provided via Nittany Meadow Farm Lane, which is a private street. And the subdivision plan also specifically prohibited any additional access from these properties directly onto 322. So the request from the Yoakums was to include parcel A in the proposed agricultural district. We also received a request from the Hunt Ridge Manor Homeowners Association representative asking that their parcel, that's an open space lot labeled as B, there on the right side, be included in the proposed agricultural district. And we also received an email from Galen Drybelbis requesting that his 2 acre parcel labeled C be included in the district as well. So this picture here on the right that shows A, B, and C, those areas are what has been requested to be included in the proposed agricultural district. So I want to first go over the open space lot, the open space rural clustering regulations, and what is allowed on an open space lot. So these regulations further define how an open space lot can be used. It's important to understand that while we may have uses listed in our ag district chart that go beyond this list, if you have an open space rural clustering development, your open space lot can only be utilized for these uses. So we have public park and recreational areas. We have things like tilling of the land, horticultural uses, farm structures, keeping livestock, commercial establishments for processing, storing, and selling farm products that were produced on site. We also currently list conservation of water, soil, forest, and wildlife resources. And we also allow areas for potable water, well use, and treatment and disposal of wastewater. So an open space lot is not allowed to be used for a farm winery, a landscape contractor business, regardless of whatever the underlying zoning district is, because these regulations further define what is allowed. So what we did is looking at the request to change the zoning to ag, what would this mean in terms of what permitted uses or what uses would be permitted on these properties? So for the open space lot, the Immel open space lot, there would be no change to the uses that could be allowed. Again, because the uses that are permitted on this lot are defined by the open space rural clustering regulations. For the Hunt Ridge Manor open space lot, it also would not have any change to its permitted use. This property is perpetual open space and includes a stormwater facility as well as natural and environmental features. And then the 3 residential lots, 2 of which are owned by Mr. and Mrs. Immel, and then 1 that's owned by Mr. Dreibelbis. These lots would, if changed to the agricultural district, they would be allowed to be used for veterinary offices, boarding kettles, and dog training facilities. So that is the extent of the changes that would occur in terms of permitted uses if the zoning district were to be amended to include these in the agricultural district. So does the Planning Commission have any questions on the proposed zoning designation change for the Immel properties? I do have another section of my presentation, but I figured I'd stop here to see if the Planning Commission had any questions.
Looks like we have a question, Chris, for Mr. Williams.
No, I'll wait till Mark's finished. I thought he was finished with his
Okay,
presentation.
thank
Okay.
you. Any commission members, comments or questions at this point for Mark?
I'm not
Mark,
seeing any.
I don't see any, Mark. If I'm missing something, sorry, but I'm not seeing any, so you can go ahead, I believe.
All right, so the second thing that we looked at was the alternative that had been proposed by Mr. Glantz, which was that the property owners at the time would have been satisfied if the township was willing to amend the rural residential regulations to allow, and as they worded it, permit all current agricultural uses on parcels over 10 acres in size. They also suggested that that restriction would apply to parcels that are eligible for clean and green, as well as in those enrolled in the agricultural security area of the township. From staff's perspective, we did not look at the second bullet point. I think from an administrative point of view, if there's going to be changes made, we would rather not have to try to track whether or not a property is enrolled in clean and green or ag security. Those are voluntary programs that people can unenroll from at any time. So from our perspective, we would just prefer to look at it based on an acreage requirement. And as was stated in the request, or on the proposal rather, is that this solution would permit the rezoning to go forward while at the same time enabling all current agricultural uses on large parcels. So what I wanted to do was just walk through this briefly to show what impacts would happen if we were to take and change our rural residential regulations to allow some of these additional uses that I talked about early in the presentation in our rural residential district. So farm wineries, these were added as a permitted use in our current agricultural district in 2011. This use is not considered an agricultural operation, but it can be established in conjunction with one. So essentially a farm winery is only required to have 2 acres of planted fruit used in wine production. A farm winery is allowed to bring in additional juice beyond what the Pennsylvania right to farm law would require to make wine, as long as they maintain that 2 acres of planted fruit. These uses are not, or this use is not currently proposed as a permitted use in the proposed rural residential district, but would be permitted in the updated agricultural as well as the proposed natural areas district. Again, farm wineries are not permitted on open space lots created through our open space rural clustering regulations, including the 16.85 acre Immel tract. So when we looked at the properties that could potentially be eligible to be a farm winery in our rural residential district, this is the map that we created. So our map maker used a nice wine color there to differentiate the properties that would be eligible to be a farm winery. Some of these are obviously already developed. You have Mountain View Country Club, as well as a number of large lot residential uses off of Crestview Avenue, things like that. But this is the location where a farm winery would be permitted if we were to add this as a permitted use in our rural residential district chart. The next use we looked at were the landscape contractor businesses. This use was added as a permitted use in the agricultural district in 2012. This is also not considered an agricultural operation, but it can be established on a lot that does contain one. We do not require any plantings of any type for these uses. They do need to have direct frontage and access provided via a collector or arterial street. They're not permitted in the proposed rural residential district, but are listed as a permitted use in the updated agricultural district. And again, this use would also not be permitted on open space lots that were established through the open space rural clustering regulations. And this map shows the location where these uses could potentially be established. Mountain View Country Club does not have direct access to an arterial or collector street, since their current access is off of Elks Club Road. So this one, they would have to, if somebody were to want to try to develop this there in the future, they'd have to get access directly off of either 45 or 322. This parcel down here is in the same kind of situation. They currently access Bear Meadows Road, which is not an arterial or a collector. The only property that would actually be eligible without any access issues is this one up here, which I believe is owned by Fuller, if I'm not mistaken, and was recently 2 residential lots were carved off of that not too long ago. So we only would have one property that at current could establish that use if it were permitted in the district. Then the last is Agritainment Enterprises, and this is proposed as an accessory use in our updated agricultural district. We do not currently allow Agritainment Enterprises in the township. Mr. Immel, before he bought the Oakham property, he actually called and was asking about this, and that was one of the discussions we had with him, is that we don't allow these currently, but the township's trying to update our regulations to try to include these as a permitted use. And as I mentioned, they'd be an accessory use in our ag district. They need to be associated with an active agricultural operation as defined by the township's ordinances as well as by the state. They need to have direct frontage and access provided via an arterial street. And this is something that the Planning Commission might recall you discussed at length not too long ago. That was something that I know came up about possibly expanding it, and you did not feel that was a good idea. And then additional regulations also apply to these uses. I didn't want to go into the full amount. If this use was permitted in the rural residential district, the Immel property would not be eligible strictly due to the fact it does not meet the access requirements. Certainly they may have an active agricultural use on the property, but they don't have the access that's required since they utilize a private street to get onto 322. So again, looking at where this would be possible, currently, I don't think any property would be eligible right off the bat. The only properties that could be eligible are shown here in purple. Again, it would be a matter of them getting the appropriate access onto an arterial street. And that was one of the things I know the Planning Commission talked a lot about, was the concern of how allowing these on other streets could result in some traffic issues, since we're not quite certain how impactful these uses might be over time. So this shows, again, properties that potentially could be established with agritainment use, but it would have to be where they got access directly onto an arterial street to do so. So then in conclusion, changing the proposed zoning district of the Immel properties, as well as the others that were requested, would not result in any significant benefits to the property owners in terms of agricultural uses that would be allowed. The proposed text amendments outlined in the April 2nd letter from Mr. Glantz would have no impact on the uses permitted on the Immel properties in particular. Where neither request would impact the agricultural or agricultural related uses permitted on the properties in question, the Planning Commission should consider recommending that the Immel properties remain in the proposed rural residential district, which is consistent with the designated rural areas project. And if the township is interested in permitting additional uses on these open space lots that were created through our open space rural clustering regulations, this would require significant amendments beyond those that have been proposed. and would probably take some time to evaluate and determine how that could occur. So that concludes my presentation, and I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen and be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have questions from members of the public or comments from the members of the public who are here? Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Amy. Terry Williams, and I'm representing the Emmels, who are new to the property. You've apparently chased Mr. Yoakum out of the township, and I'm teasing a little bit. Well, I appreciate Mark's careful analysis in the paperwork that he's provided. Mark, I'm looking in the material to what doesn't have a page number, but unfortunately it's Yoakum Properties zoning request. And if you can show that, my reason is that you clearly delineate on that the A, B, and C parcels that you talked about. Immel's property, the Hunt Ridge Manor open space, and Mr. Drabble's property at C.
Yes, let me.
If it's not too much trouble,
Not a problem. Just had to find the slide again. Make it easy here. So
okay. Well, while Mark's looking for that,
there we go.
yes, that's it. Thank you.
No problem.
First of all, if I understand where you are at this point, this is not a change in zoning. It is merely maintaining the current agricultural zone for those properties. And that's important because it adjoins an agricultural zone. And Mark and I could spend the next 2 hours of your time talking about the impact of spot zoning versus non-spot zoning, but I don't think that's really relevant to your decision. Where Mark and I will clearly disagree is the ramification of the large lot marked in A being open space. That was approved as a part of the development plan by a predecessor to Mr. Yoakum, but the development plan itself was never put into effect. So that in order to do agro-tourism business, which clearly is what Mr. Emmel wants to do, he's not trying to blindside anybody here, that's what he wants to do, he would have to seek a recombination of those lots in order to allow the direct access to 322 and arterial, and also to help him with clean and green, and to get the property to a size that would allow him to do that. That's a battle, I realize, that Mr. Emmel's going to have to fight down the road, but it becomes so much worse if this area is rezoned rural residential. The property, of course, it has the very small amount that flows in Spring Creek through it. It has wetlands in it. There's a lot of environmental concerns in that regard, which would limit things that you might want to do from an agricultural standpoint because of that proximity. It also has a characteristic of, obviously, as all of you know, a house, barn, outbuilding. It clearly is a farmette by anyone's common definition. And you, in rezoning it to rural residential, you take away a number of the uses that would otherwise be made of that property, which I think is what you'd really want. It seems like an unnecessary exercise to rezone A, B, and C, but rather to include those as a part of the agricultural zone that you're proposing. To try to get the Board of Supervisors to come to a conclusion about changing uses in rural residential seems to me to be a tremendous nightmare, both for the planning commission and obviously your planning staff, because you always then have to worry, well, where's this going to apply somewhere else? The simple solution to this is to leave it as an agricultural zone and then allow Mr. Emmel down the road to decide whether or not he's able to use the property for the purposes which he wishes. And we would ask the Planning Commission to advise the supervisors to leave those areas, A, B, and C, in the agricultural zone, remembering that the B lot or B tract is open space and clearly is open space, and it is a part of dedicated because of the development of Hunt Ridge Manor at the top of the hill. And Mr. Drybel was having requested that his smaller 2-acre lot be left in that. And we would ask for your consideration on that point. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Other comments from members of the public? Non-commissioned members?
Don't see any.
Beg pardon, Amy?
I don't see any.
Yeah, me either. Okay, commission members, what are your thoughts, questions, comments? Kent?
Yeah, I have. I mean, my first comment is I am opposed to allowing amending the RR district to allow agri-tangment landscape contractor and wineries. I just think that that really complicates the intention of the RR district, so I'm opposed to that and would not recommend that at all. As far as the map boundary itself, I think the logic that Mark has shown makes sense to me, including even this parcel 5 that we were looking at previously.
Right,
So
right.
it makes sense to me. So, however, I do want to just, and I've been saying this the last couple meetings, if you could pull back up that drawing you had of those 3 lots. I just want to make a point I have about the detention pond. If you look at lot, you know, I think it looks fine. Like I say, I think it looks fine. Keeping A, B, and C as RR, and even putting that lot 5, which is on the other side of 322 in the RR district. However, if the supervisors would decide to go ahead and zone that ag, and I think it could be done without being spot zoning, if you include all 3 of those lots. But for lot B, I do feel that the detention pond portion of that lot, which is the about the half of it that's closest to the subdivision, should remain in RR, just because I think that a detention pond should be located in the zoning district for the development. And I think that was an issue with the Arch development out in Ferguson Township. They had their detention pond in the ag district. And, the developer eventually won the case, but I think that really complicated it. And I don't think we should do that. So I think if the supervisors would decide to have A, B, and C be ag, that at least half of B stay in the RR. So that's just, so I guess I'm making 2 statements. One is I think the map looks fine the way Mark's drawn it, but if we do change it, I just want to make another issue that I think the detention pond portion of it remain in RR, which means the zoning boundary would split lot B. I don't know if anybody can understand what I'm saying there, or Mark, if you're able to kind of put a marker, kind of what I'm talking about.
I can do that here. I'll have to minimize it and then come back to it, but I can do that then.
And,
while you're doing that, is there any downside to splitting one property in 2 different zoning districts?
I mean, my point would be the use of the detention pond would be part of the subdivision, so it should stay with that use.
Yeah.
And then the assumption would be that the remainder of lot B, which is basically just open space. I guess you could use Spring Creek as somewhat of a boundary, and that the area from 322 to somewhere past Spring Creek could stay in ag. Even though, you know, it's not really a farming property, it's an open space lot, but you could do that. And that could occur, in my opinion, without, yes, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
You know, I will comment that looks like a real gerrymandered line, doing all that.
You can.
But I'm just saying you could do that and not be what I'd call spot zoning. I don't agree with it, but I say it could be done.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I think Kent's point was very well made. I've been struggling with trying to figure out how to say this as well, but I'm glad he brought up the gerrymandering. It just looks like it's carved up for a specific purpose, into smaller plots. When staying within the sewer boundary leads it in the direction that the Planning Commission chose for it in the first place. I think their logic was sound years ago when they came to this conclusion, and I think trying to rearrange it by, you know, a 90-degree angle here and a 45-degree angle there doesn't serve the community's purpose as much as it serves an individual's purpose.
Is everybody okay if I stop sharing, by the way? Or would you like me to keep this?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Amy, George, Bob, Rich, Jackie, Randy, what are you thinking here?
I tend to agree with Ken's point about it seems to be, if we start sort of carving it up in these smaller parcels, it looks less planful, right? And I think that is of concern, and that puts us in a place of being vulnerable to being thought that it was spot zoning. I appreciate the concern and the desire to maintain agricultural properties, but I think what we're trying to do is cluster the development spaces, and these happen to be properties that fall within that clustering mindset.
Well, and Chris, if I might, just remember what the solicitor told us, which was that we need to be mindful of the spot zoning, and that just because there's a request from a property owner doesn't give us any coverage under the law. That in fact would lead the law to think that that was spot zoning. And when this was sent back from the Board of Supervisors, the direction very clearly from the solicitor, and I'm sure Mr. Williams can appreciate this because he is a municipal solicitor, but the direction back was that we should look at the methodology and make sure that we were following our own methodology in what we decided to do, because that is how we give ourselves cover so we don't have a spot zoning claim. I understand and appreciate, and I'm glad Mr. Immel bought that property. You know, we don't have a goat farm in the township. I think that's pretty exciting stuff that he wants to do out there, and we've had some nice conversations with that. But just like every other property in the township, sometimes you can't do everything you want to do on a piece of property, right? And you have to weigh those benefits. And as a planning commission, we're looking at Harris Township for the next 10, 15, 20 years with our regulations and our zoning. We've been through a very long and very deliberate process with how we developed our map and how we developed our ordinance. And I think the supervisors have said a couple of times, the ordinance is very sound, and they don't want to go back and revisit sections of the ordinance because they agree with all of it. So really this map is the last piece of the puzzle. And, you know, gerrymandering is not the best term, I think, because it's kind of politically charged, but you could change a line, right? And change that piece in the Hunt Ridge Manor property. But that property is not going to be developed. It's a stormwater basin. But what are you getting in the end game? Are you just getting a way to then make a request for a property owner? And then are you leaving yourself open to any other property owner in the township bringing a spot zoning case against the township. So those are just things, obviously, I don't get a vote, but those are just things that you guys need to think about and the supervisors need to think about.
Mhm. Thank you, Amy. That's good to highlight that and remind us of the communications that we've had from the solicitor on this specifically. George,
I don't know how we could have sat through and participated in the meetings that we have, most especially these last two, and then come to the end and say we're going to leave these properties as ag. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think that we've all agreed on the methodology. We have them in a mapping situation that we were comfortable with, and I continue to be comfortable with. And I think A, B, C, and 5, what we're referring to as Lot 5, should move to the proposed rural residential and become rural residential zoned.
thank you, George. Anybody else? I'll just comment that I was struck at Mr. Williams' commentary where, the aspirations of Mr. Immel include, combining some properties to perhaps one day be able to do that and have arterial street access seems, well, just that aspirational, and makes to me a little clearer why perhaps the specific request has happened at this time and in this sequence. I'll just comment here that just is notable to me. Okay, I am not seeing any other comments. I don't see any other hands raised. I think we are at the point where we can entertain a motion to accept the recommendations of staff on the proposed rural residential zoning district. Let me stop there and see if someone wants to voice that a little bit more articulately than I just did. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
I will move that.
So this is the three properties on the north side of 322 and that map area number 5 to the south to stay as originally suggested in the proposed rural residential zoning district.
And Chris, perhaps after you do this motion, let's then get a general motion from the Planning Commission just accepting the draft zoning map as presented.
Thank you. So the first motion, maybe a second.
I just want a
I'll second it.
clarification.
Yep. Kent?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. Okay, so on a clarification, so I believe what Bill and George's motion was is that these 3 lots, stay as RR, and that lot 5 on the other side of the street be switched to RR. Is that what the motion was?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you. That's clear, stated more clearly. And George, did you second that? It was a little unclear to me.
I did.
Okay.
I did, but with Ken's clarification, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Other discussion? Those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And now more generally, the proposed zoning district changes.
The proposed zoning map.
Could we just
Thank
review that real quickly then?
Yeah,
the
please.
changes. Thank you.
Mark, can you do that?
What, do you want to see the entire zoning map or the first couple slides I pulled up that showed with the changed areas highlighted? Which were you?
That's fine. The first couple was fine.
Yep.
Let me just find the right one real quick for you. Sorry. All right. Okay. So this is the proposed zoning map, and then you made your recommendations on the 5 numbered areas that would be changed based on your recommendations for those that you wanted changed.
And so, Mark, my question is, to really clarify my question, that large tract of land between Fairfield and number 1, that's going to remain ag?
Let me just turn this on. This area right here?
Yes.
Yes.
So there
Yeah.
will be a gap between,
This is the only part that would be rural residential. There would be ag all around here.
right, which seems a little discontinuous. And then 2 and 3 are going to remain ag? Is that what we said?
Yeah, that was the motion that was made, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I move we approve this map as we've made the changes tonight.
I will second that.
Other comments or questions? Those in favor of those changes as discussed?
Aye.
Aye.
This is a vote.
Opposed?
Nay.
Thank
Bob,
you,
was
Bob.
that, Bob, you were against?
Yeah, I don't like number 1. I think if we're going to have a cornfield between Fairfield and the ball field, that should all be ag. But my general.
Okay, motion carries.
So just one point of order on all of this. The Board of Supervisors will be using their second meeting this month, which is May 26th at 7:30, to primarily just focus on this item because this is sucking up a large amount of their time on their agenda, which it should. So we wanted to allow them to have the appropriate amount of time to discuss this. So May 26th at 7:30, we expect them to take their final action on this, and then it will be moved up to CRPC in advance of a public hearing later this summer for adoption.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you.
Amy,
Moving on then.
that's going to be a public meeting or whether that's going to be a Zoom meeting.
Meeting on the 26th will be a Zoom meeting. That will be our last Zoom meeting for the board. After that, they're going back to in-person.
Thank you.
Moving on, agenda for June for the Planning Commission. We pushed some things down the road, so to speak, last month and a half, 2 months. What, Amy, are we looking at to swing back into action on in the next meeting?
Well, I have a suggestion for you. Your planner is going to be on vacation, Mark. And my suggestion would be that you could take off the month of June while Mark's on vacation and then meet again in July. I understand our chairman's going to be away as well in June. So unless we have any plans come in, which Todd, I don't know that we have anything on the docket right now. No.
Is there reason to include any kind of, I don't know, primer or continuing ed on the official map or something of that ilk?
No, we want to do that with the, you already had your continuing ed on that at the, 2 meetings ago, Mark did that. And your next meeting on the official map, we'll do this summer with the Parks and Rec Committee, and we'll do that probably outside somewhere where we can spread out.
Why don't we delay finalizing the plan for June until we have a chance to chat, Amy, and see what else might make sense to move ahead. We can announce that later.
Yeah, I would just suggest that because Mark's not going to be here, there's not much that can happen because Mark does the bulk of the planning, of course, with Todd.
Sure.
But there's not much that can happen when Mark isn't here. So absent a plan that needs action on, I would suggest you just skip your June meeting.
Okay, I'd still like to finalize that decision, not tonight.
One thing I'd also like to bring up is you guys will eventually have to go back to some kind of in-person meetings as well, because the vaccinations seem to be ramping up enough that the pandemic seems to be winding down in places. One thing I'd like you to think about, you don't need to answer it tonight, is we've been recording all of these meetings and posting them on our YouTube channel. Once you go back to in-person meetings, we lose the ability to do that unless you join CNET. And if you join CNET, all of your channel, we can stream your meetings live on our YouTube channel, and then also your meetings will be streamed on their website and shown on Channel 7. And I think what we've learned through the pandemic is that people have greater access to their local government because of these virtual meetings and because of the technologies that we've tried to embrace. So I really would like the Planning Commission to give serious consideration to going on to CNET. I know in the past you've said no, but I think you're running out of reasons not to do it when you've been recorded and on the internet all these months anyway. You just haven't been, live. So.
Can we, I don't want to talk about it tonight. We can consider that when we next meet, but it would be nice to see what kind of viewing rates of the archived meetings there have been on YouTube. That might indicate the demand for recorded meetings available later.
So I'm going to put my manager hat on for just a moment. Deb Lang travels a half an hour to work every day. And at nights when we have meetings where she has to be here to do the minutes, Deb doesn't go home until after the meeting is over. These virtual meetings have allowed Deb to do the minutes from home. If you move to CNET and then we stream on YouTube, not only can our residents watch, but Deb can do the minutes from her house and not have to stay here until 9-10 o'clock at night. So from a staffing standpoint, I'm strongly asking you to go on to CNET. I do not think you have a reason not to do it anymore. We have no other way to record the meeting. Like, I can't record it unless you're on CNET, so.
Let's move on to reports, please. Will there be any zoning permits that we need to pop into the township office to review, or did you get enough signatures on the existing ones, Todd, to take care of them?
Yeah, I don't know if everybody's been in to sign all of the backlog. And last week, I believe I completed another report. And I know a couple of people have been in to take a look at it, but I don't know that everybody has been.
Okay. Amy, what do you have on Center Region Planning Commission?
So on May 10th, you received a summary of the meeting from May 6th. So I will recommend that you check your email for that summary. It's a good, concise report of the things we discussed. Just a couple of items. One is that the industrial zone in Ferguson Township was recommended to include fitness centers. So that was sort of a novel addition. The other is that the MPO is, let me see if I can get that right. There was a recommended agreement for the increase in base funds. There are some issues that are coming up with regard to that, but I'll recommend that you look at the summary. And the other is that May is bike month, and there are a lot of events happening in this area to support and encourage bike to work or bike anywhere activities. And so if you haven't seen the resources or the promotional materials, I recommend that you take a look. This is a significant area of growth and of support for the kind of transportation that we would like to be encouraging within this region. So take a look, and that's all.
Thank you. Any questions for Amy in the Center Region Planning operation? George, how about the technical committee?
Our last technical committee meeting was the 14th, so it fell before our last planning commission meeting, and I gave a report at that point.
Got it. Okay.
Although I have been in touch several times over the last few weeks with Tom Zilla regarding the Pathways Initiative, which towards the end of May, there's a group meeting on. Group meetings where the group will make recommendations to send forward to that commission.
Okay. Thanks for keeping that moving forward and on top of that with him. Any questions for George? Comments? Amy, do you want to summarize recent Board of Supervisors actions, please?
Sure. The board heard a presentation on the State College Area Connector Project Pell study. It looks like we'll be hearing again from those folks in the fall. The board approved the Hawk Ridge revised final subdivision plan, and the board approved the Kaywood North Estates lots preliminary subdivision plan.
Yes, Ken.
I just had a couple questions on the Kaywood approval. At our meeting, we talked about a few items. I assume they cleared up all the stormwater issues, which they were significant when we were still looking at it. But I wanted to know, we talked about a potential bike path access, and then the park access, and then the street tree locations. Did they resolve those three items? Do you know?
So the bike path access is not something that we can ask the developer to do. We don't have the means to do that. The park access, yes, I believe they changed that on the plan. They indicated in your meeting they were going to do that. And the Shade Tree Commission just reviewed the street trees at their meeting last week. They reviewed the species, and they're actually ecstatic that the trees are going to be on the backside of the sidewalks, because that gives the trees plenty of room to spread out their roots and, you know, being planted in that easement. And that's something we've been looking at for other street trees in the township, other locations, to minimize tree sidewalk conflicts.
So they were able to move the utilities, soft utilities back far enough away from that?
I don't know, because they don't have public sewer to those
No,
lots.
I mean like cable and electric. I think there was some issue with those being in the same easement, but they were talking about just trying to push those back to the back of the easement or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't seen the revised plan. Todd would know better than I.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Williams, Frank, thanks. We had a couple other guests. Mr. Immel, thank you, Paul, for joining us tonight, and Planning Commission members. I think that concludes our business for tonight. I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll second it.
All those in favor of adjourning this meeting?
Aye.
May 17th meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.